All right, guys. We'll
Cool.
leave you to Kev. So he'll probably talk
Molchanov
about
system,
what he wants to talk
safety.
about.
Molchanov system, how it's different to the courses you might have done before, and then safety stuff, how you guys are actually hyperventilating and you don't realize it if you haven't done a course, and then even then probably. And then a little bit about just blue water and guns and stuff. So try and keep it to about 35, 40 minutes.
Cool. All right, guys. The one thing that I'd just ask of you guys is that if you have any questions, please just remember them and wait till the end so we can sort of get through it.
Text them to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kev will be barraged with them at the end.
Yeah.
All right, mate.
Cheers, mate. G'day, guys. So when we do intros, normally you got a course of people and they all don't know each other. I go first because I like talk a lot about myself, and that takes way too long. So I was a ex-army medic from January 2000 to February 2005. I was in the army as a medic. Bailed, got out of there. Worked as a tuna diver, was my first diving job. I'm now a commercial diver, so I work on the rigs doing like deep sea saturation diving. I don't know, does anyone know anyone who actually does that? Because it's a bit weird. Like apparently someone mentioned Brendan Molhart does it. Guys who live in that pressurized bubble for a month and breathe like heliox and don't see daylight and fresh air. So I've done 18 months of that in my life, so it's not a normal job. So when you're doing offshore work and you're like, I don't have to come back to Perth anymore, I decided to hang out in other places. So Bali was fucking awesome. And so that's my background. So I'm a hyperbaric medic, dive medical technician, and I've been teaching now since 2012. But in the last couple of years where the oil price really took a hit, I've been teaching full time now for 2 years. So like when people teach in their home destination, they might do like 40, 50 people a year. We do 500, 600 a year. So we have a bunch of instructors. I try and offload most of the teaching onto them, and like Rory was saying, try and just look after people that are spearfishing focused. But it's definitely a rewarding job, and so we have people of all levels, like people who are fucking terrified of the water and they're Chinese or Indian, and then people who have guns who come through and have done all sorts of stuff. We had, Graham's not here tonight, but we had him for not a course but a refresher a few months ago. And he's one of these guys who's been doing it a long, long time. But has he actually done? No, he did do a course at some point with Therese back in the day. So a lot of people, it's not that they have bad habits, but we're going to talk about safety because it has to be the number one thing. Like everyone's seen my video from last year where I done a few things wrong, was diving by myself and had a muzzle wrap and nearly got fucked up. And so when you analyze an accident, there's always more than one thing that went wrong. It wasn't just this happened. It's always a snowball effect, or what they call a Swiss cheese effect, where there's multiple layers that failed to work at the same time. And so blackouts are the same as well. Like has anyone got a blackout story themselves? Yeah, just for show of hands, just to see how common it is. Someone's got two hands up and a leg, or Liam, yeah. So maybe like 4 or 5 guys have been around a blackout before. Was it any of them you guys having the blackout? Not on the course though. Fuck, Jesus. Yeah, don't know where he got that t-shirt. Yeah. So it's not that they're common, right? Blackouts are not common. The people are sometimes sitting in the class and we're talking about the safety stuff and someone's sitting there looking a bit scared and they're like, so Kev, when I have my blackout, I'm like, no. You can go through your whole freediving gig and not have a blackout ever, right? It's just that when they do occur, it's usually a bunch of things going wrong at once. And so in our environment, it's quite often people that are pushing themselves, people who are trying to do their personal best and their limits, but then you go into the people that get complacent, and then you develop bad habits that don't bode well for a long, happy future. But so there's 1, 2, anyone else for blackouts? Like experience? Yourself or someone else? You've had a few. Yeah. Jesus, all right. But we'll pay attention to you in the breathing section, because what we'll say to people is, you don't realize you're hyperventilating, but you are. And people will be like, oh, I'm not hyperventilating. And be like, really? Why don't we talk about your breather? So we'll go into how blackouts happen, how many people have done a course? Just big show of hands. Hi. Almost everybody. Cool. All right. cool. So I'm going to go through the hyperventilation, breathe out, mammalian dive and reflex stuff, and hopefully that will have been pretty solid from when you guys did your course. And if not, it can't be presented better than this. Like I've worked with Alexey Molchanov, who's the world champ, for 4 2-week seminars, and Adam Stern, he's an up-and-comer. I was working with Adam when he was only a 60-meter diver, and now he's 100 and whatever, 18. So I have not heard it presented better than we'll put it out to you now. And if you're leaving a level 1, which is a beginner freediving course, the one thing you really should have absolutely crystal clear is how to dive as safe as possible. And I've had 5 friends die spearfishing freediving. It's not like a, bragging rights, like who's got the most, but it can happen to anybody. And like that thing that happened to me the other day, even when I was doing something that's seemingly risk-free, or not risk-free, but benign, I still nearly came unstuck. And that was 2 weeks after one of my best friends died in Nusa Penida, spooled by a 33 kilo GT. So Penida, you say Penida, people think about the currents and down currents. None of that shit. He just shot a 33 kilo GT on a shitty Andre Gold 1.3 gun with not enough reel line. And the gun was recovered the next day with a 33 kilo GT wrapped up on coral at wrapped up at 50 meters, but his gun was hanging mid-water and his body was recovered the day after. So we were both doing 60-meter dives together. He had a 6-minute breath hold. We were the same, 6-minute breath hold, 60-meter dives, and he just tried to haul up a fucking GT, and it's just, you're not going to win. So, when they were searching for his body, there's this Moreno from Gili Airs, quite a famous spearo out there, called me. I was on a visa run in Singapore, and said, hey, look, I really don't think he's just been swept out to sea. They're not going to find him because it's Nico. He's the younger brother of Mario Spearfishing, who's quite a famous spearfishing brand out there as well. And he hit those boys, like they party pretty hard. They smoke, not that smoking is a problem, but they smoke pot like on the way out to go diving because it chills them out. And they would have been probably a bit hungover, and his job was to produce like trophy fish for the spearfishing trip day so they can cook it up and everyone can have a good time. He would not have come back to the boat going, oh, fuck, man. Yeah, big fish, lost the gun. He would have been like, oh, because every other fucking time in his life, he would have just been able to like dig deep, paddle a bit harder and haul it up to the surface. So with no safety diver, he's not here anymore. We had guys do level 1 and 2 with us out on the Mentawais Islands. His name is Paul Benbow. He's doing, it's a one-on-one course actually. He's like, Kev, but like after a day of surfing, he's one of the best surfers you'll ever meet in your life. Well, you're not going to meet him anymore. But he says at the end of the day of surfing, everyone's completely gassed out or they just want to get on the piss. So I'm always spearfishing by myself. I said, dude, most of us are spearfishing by ourselves. So if you're going to do something where the worst outcome is you could lose your life, it's irresponsible not to do that, knowing all of the risk factors, variables, and stack the odds in your favor. And the big one when you're on your own is surface intervals, making sure you've had double the amount of time out of the water and that you are not hyperventilating and that you're not pushing your limits. So no one was there when he died, but yeah, they messaged me. I was out at work and said, hey, Benny's passed away. And I said, please tell me he fucking snapped his neck in a wave, because if he died spearfishing, it's such a fucking waste, a horrible waste of life. Alexey Molchanov's mum was the most famous woman in freediving. She was better than 98% of all men on planet Earth. She had a 9-minute 4-second breath hold. He's got an 8-minute 30 breath hold. Sometimes at competitions, he would get guys like Goran and like competition going, oh, Alexey, I beat you in the breath hold. He's like, yeah, but my fucking mum beat you, bro. So she was like an absolute powerhouse and an icon of the sport. She was teaching some super rich Russian guy out in Ibiza on their super yacht. They had the line set to 18 meters, and in between his diving session, she went for a no fins dive by herself to who knows how deep, but she can do 82 meters. So she just never returned. And so if you don't have a freediving line and a lanyard and a safety diver, you don't have any second chances. And I'm all for people going out and accepting their own risk in the world, but you push those limits that many times, you will come unstuck eventually. She could have been at 40 meters, which is half of her dive, which is not really considered pushing it at all. That would be recreational freediving, and had a leg cramp or had a jellyfish sting or had a fucking heart attack, who knows? So there's just no second chances. It doesn't matter how good you are. Patrick Masumi was the first guy to do more than 200 meters on the sled. He was found dead in his backyard swimming pool. Not distance, not depth, just fucking holding his breath wet by his wife and daughter. So it doesn't matter how good you are. Like my thing the other day, you bend the rules that many times, at some point you'll come unstuck. So, cool bananas. All right, this is a video from our level 2 course. Everyone knows Andre from Terra Australis or the Terra Australis crew or videos? If you don't, they're West Australian boys, they're commercial divers, and they were doing a whole bunch of trips up and down the West Coast. And they were like, literally, the shit we see is so awesome, we can't not start recording this and getting it out there. So for years, they were just making these cool videos, just of shit that they've seen and done, but they were also sponsored by like Special Fins, Rabitech, Hex Wetsuits, Octomask, a bunch of stuff. They're really good lads. But this is a video of Andre blacking out on our level 2 course. It's very unusual to see level 2s black out. They're just literally not underwater long enough for that to happen. Level 1s, I would say, hand on my heart, fucking impossible. It's just people don't yet have the ability to push themselves that far into hypoxia, because the carbon dioxide, which is one of the things we'll talk about in a second, just brings them back before that, unless you hyperventilate. So yeah, this is Andre blacking out. I put this on because 99% of blackouts are going to happen on the surface. The guy gets back, or girl gets back from a dive. When you're a little bit hypoxic, you're not thinking exactly straight. You forget to do your proper recovery breathing. You see people come back and they just have fixed eyes and they're looking, and then they just sink away. So yeah, I won't steal his thunder. It's Andre and Johnny.
We were doing our deeper dives down past 30 metres. There's a bit of a group of us, a few of us together, like friends. So it was all pretty relaxed, but I was still a little bit nervous, you know, like breathing up. Still had a bit of butterflies, like this is going to be a deeper one. Like I've never really done much diving past 30 metres. End up taking the dive down and ended up going down past 32 metres. And
did you feel good on the bottom? Felt fine?
Yeah, it was good, man. I felt a bit of squeeze and that, but it felt great. Definitely wasn't out of air or anything. And then so I turned and started to make my way back to the surface. And on the way to the surface, there's actually a big school of trevally swimming around. And got closer towards the surface, and I had that big blood shift, and I could feel the legs really starting to burn. And started getting closer and closer, and I still felt great. I'd seen the target float at the surface, and it wasn't far from me now. And I suppose maybe the last few seconds was a bit blank, because I don't fully remember grabbing the float, but we were sort of coming up and looking to my mate's face, and then that was sort of it. And then next minute, I could just remember everyone telling me to breathe. I heard everyone could see.
That's the best thing, isn't it? That breathe, like people saying breathe, it makes you realise where you are and what's happening.
It definitely gives you that mind boost of you going, oh, I blacked out. Yeah. I knew I was underwater, I knew I was freediving.
It's Ben Coy.
Hearing someone telling me to breathe, I was like, alright, I'm meant to breathe now. So I started breathing, and actually, yeah, it was a really euphoric feeling.
What's a kicker about that is these guys were doing level 1 and 2, and Andre and all these boys were already spearing for however many years. So they had to do, everyone has to do day 1, level 1. That's when you do all of the essentials, safety and breathe up, and all the foundational stuff that you need and is assumed knowledge for later on. But because they were already doing the requirements, we took them on a fun dive to the Liberty Wreck in Tulan just down the road. And when you're fun freediving in a group where there's good viz, you don't really pair up, you don't really one up, one down, because everyone's working in like half of their ability. That's not really freediving for that individual. If someone can do 60-meter dives and they're doing a 20-meter dive, they're not really touching the edges of what they can do. Unless Andre says to me, hey Kev, can you film me on this one? I'm gonna go down to the bottom of the cargo hold. So like if you're spearfishing with mates, yeah, while it always should be one up, one down, if people are responsible and sensible, you can get away with a long, healthy life of being conservative. But many times you go like, hey, I want to go and check out this ledge, or I'm going to go for a longer dive. Someone will say, can you watch me on this one? And then you're their buddy until they're back. So I take the camera off Andre. He does a breathe up for no longer than 2 minutes, but we're already quite warmed up. He's down. I follow him down from about 10 meters. He's at 22, 23 meters. At about 2 minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm going to the surface. I still film him. I hit the surface at like 225, 230. He turns, so he's at the surface at 255. A guy who just did a super comfortable dive to 22, 23 meters for 2 minutes 55, then the very next day has a blackout doing 33 meters for 1 minute 35. How is that possible? Purely because he was stressed about, oh shit, it's gonna be a deeper dive. I'm gonna have to breathe a little bit more than normal. I'm gonna need that extra gas in the tank. And so when he said, I still felt kind of all right getting to the surface, I wasn't really out of gas, that's because he'd allowed himself to sneakily hyperventilate. And we'll talk about that in a second. My mate who died in Penida, we were setting up for Alexey Molchanov's crew the first year they were there in 2012, setting up 5 buoys in 30 meter lines in 35, 6 meters to the bottom. When really nice way to freedive train and to warm up is variable weights for guys that have done courses or level 2s. Oh yes, sorry, yeah, over here, yeah. Variable weights where you just ride a weight down to the end of the line, and then so you've used 0 energy to do your duck dive transition and get down. Then you can super chill out, come back as easy as you want. We were doing some variable weights to the 30 meter line, and I was so relaxed on one of them that I disconnected the wrong carabiner, and when I held onto the rope, the carabiner fell to the bottom in 36, 37 meters. I was like, fucking moron. So I took my weight belt off and put it on the rope so that the rope was at least hanging down in the target area. Went down for a look, and I could see the weight, 8 kilos, is like 6, 7, 8 kilos out, meters out, and 5, 6, 7 meters deeper. I was back on the surface, and Nico comes over and he says, hey, what's up? I'm like, oh man, I just dropped this weight. I'm gonna have to get the connection line, like 10 meter line, go connect it to the weight, connect it to the bottom of the line, then haul it all back up and reset. And he's like, I'll get it. I was like, you can't get it, man. It's like down, and he's like, I was like, all right, no worries, mate. I'll rescue you. You're fucking definitely gonna black out. Like, it's his second dive of the day. He does exactly what Andre did. Breathed for like 2 minutes, turned, really lazy duck dive, down the line, into free fall. I watched him to about 20 meters, then came down after him. He picks up this weight in 36, 37 meters, swims it up to the 30 meter thing, hooks it on, and then like swims back to the surface. And I'm just going, what the fuck? So he's a guy who had been spearfishing a long time, but he just did what I would have thought is impossible. I would not have believed it unless I'd seen it. But he had 0 anxiety about, he was 110% sure he was going to be able to do that dive. So a guy that shouldn't have been able to do a dive, cruised it in, and a guy that should have been able to shit on it, blacked out, purely from this self-belief and stress and stuff. So when people are trying to keep up with people that are better than them, the stress level goes way up, the risk goes way up. The guys from Blue Water Spearfishing, Cam Nilsson-Lynn and Robbie Ashford were out. They lost a kid. He was 17 years old. Must have been late 2000s before I left here. And on a reasonably rough day, they took a guy out who joined the club, and he was on the surface. They thought, oh, he's not diving much. In like 15, 16 meters, someone went up to check on him, and he'd been blacked out for 30 minutes, like 25, 30 minutes. So he was a guy who was trying to keep up. So Andre was doing his deepest dive. People that are diving out of their limits, definitely anything to do with fucking hangovers or being dehydrated, anything that stresses you out is like a bit of a no-go area. So that people can dive long, healthy, safe lives as long as they're conservative and they understand the limits and they avoid hyperventilating. But let's talk about hyperventilating now, because a lot of you are doing it and you don't realize. When we teach guys who are already spearfishing, we'll say, hey guys, people who are self-taught tend to hit a natural limit of about 1 minute 10, 1 minute 20 dives and like 12, 15 meters. There's not too many guys that are self-taught that are doing 18, 20 meter dives for 1 minute 30, 1 minute 40. And some people sit there and go, how does he fucking know how I'm diving? They say, well, yeah, and because you don't realize it, but you're hyperventilating. People go, oh, I'm not hyperventilating. I'm like, well, how do you breathe? And so people say, oh, I just take like relaxed, deep breaths. And okay, all right, so how many of those do you do? And they're like, well, you do your breaths for like 30 seconds and we'll count them. So they'll do like this. If I breathe like this, tell me if it looks like hyperventilating or not. Does that resemble what you associate with hyperventilating? No. But I just did a full breath, which is 6 liters in 10 seconds, which is 36 liters per minute. Anything that you breathe more than you are breathing now, anyone feel out of breath at the moment? What you're breathing now is called tidal volume. And anything more than that you breathe negatively affects your freediving. And people are like, well, that doesn't make sense because I need to take lots of deep breaths to feel comfortable. I'm like, yeah, that comfortable feeling that you get, that's not actually good for you. So all of the top guys in the sport hypoventilate. They deliberately breathe less than tidal volume that you're doing now to build up CO2, because CO2 is what turns on the mammalian diving reflex. So anyone that's kind of feeling comfortable, like Andre in that dive, you're avoiding the gateway to doing long, deep, safe dives. I brought another big marker. I don't think it's going to be big enough to. I just bought this board today. Yeah, if in the car, I think, Liam, I've got another. Oh, actually, the pack that came with this board. Yeah, cheers, bro. Thanks, man. It's good to have a slave around. They're handy. Okay, so tidal volume, guys, is like 10% of your lung volume. And so if we might have to, if I scratch that screen, just tell them it was here before. Tidal volume, 10% of your lung volume. We talk about like standard 5 liters for ladies, 6 liters for lads. So you're talking about 0, we'll stick with lads because there's only one lady here. Hi, Amanda, by the way. Hey. So you're talking about 0.5 to 0.6 liters per breath, but you have to subtract from that number dead space. Someone who's done a course, throw at me what dead space is. Shit courses, you're all fired. Dead space is anywhere where gas exchange isn't taking place. It's anywhere that's not the alveolar space. So it's your trachea, bronchi, anywhere that's not alveolar. It's about 150 mils in most people. So each breath is only 450 mils, and you're taking about 10 of them a minute. You take between 8 and 12 breaths a minute is your tidal breathing. So 10 times, you're doing about 4.5 liters per minute. I just showed you I took that deep breath, 6 liters times 6, 36 liters per minute. Yeah, if you take dead space off that, it's a little bit less, but it's still like 30 plus. Anything more than this is counterproductive to your freediving. Yeah, it might make you feel more comfortable, but you will never be doing comfortable dives more than a minute 30, minute 40 without blacking out. So what Andre experienced and described there, yeah, I felt all right when I got to the surface. If you feel, I'm going to say all right, like not feeling the urge to breathe when you got to the surface, you've hyperventilated a little bit. And lots of people who are getting back into it, like friends that have been away for the holidays and come back to teach, and they're doing like 45-meter dives, and they've just had a blackout for no fucking reason. They're like, yeah, I did hyperventilate a little bit there, actually. So we have to unlearn, and this is Graham Gould, who's been spearfishing for fucking a million years. He's like, yeah, I don't really like doing dives longer than a minute 20. They're uncomfortable. But you have to do those uncomfortable dives because it's the carbon dioxide building up that turns on this mammalian diving reflex. So I've done my first freediving course in 2004 when a bunch of guys like Jay Hayes and Cam Nilsson Lin went to do the course together in, thanks man, in Koh Tao. Then they came back and could do 2-minute dives to 25 meters, and we were all still stuck at like 15 meters and 1 minute 10, 1 minute 20. And they just went and learnt how to breathe and how to relax. Apnea total are not recognized against the other systems because the breathing that they teach is not quite as bad as what I just showed you. It's 5 seconds in, 10 seconds out, full cycles for 8 to 10 to 12 cycles. So that cycle, 5 seconds in, 10 seconds out, your instructor will tell you, hey, look, I want you to do 8 cycles, so like 2 minutes of breathing, and then you'll dive. It is hyperventilating. So what you need to unlearn is that you need to go through a really uncomfortable phase at the start of your diving, preferably. Everyone who spearfishes knows in that second hour in the water, they're way more comfortable than the first hour. They've got bottom time, they're not as gassed out when they get back to the surface. Then people think that they've just like relaxed a little bit. That's just the mammalian diving reflex that's taken an hour to turn on. And if you know how to turn it on, you can do it in a few dives, like 5 to 10 minutes. But you have to feel uncomfortable. Carbon dioxide. So people who don't free dive, if you had to ask them, when you feel the urge to breathe, do you think your oxygen is low? Everyone will say yes. And we'll say, well, actually, you've still got minutes up your sleeve. It's got nothing to do with your oxygen. There is no sensor in your body for oxygen. It's purely it has to be carbon dioxide. A wipey thing. All right. Who has a really good static time here? Like around 4.5, 5 minutes. Yeah? Cool. And anyone 4.5, 5 minutes? Anyone more than that, like 5 plus? 5 plus. So have you had keep going. You got nearly 6, didn't you? Yeah. Did you have like a samba, like wheezy head, like a woozy?
Got really blue lips on the no fins.
Yeah.
Thingo, but
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. So did you have any? At the end of that, like 5.5, 6 minutes, that's when people have actually held their breath long enough to have hypoxic symptoms. So until then, everyone who thinks that they're out of breath ain't really out of breath. It's just their conditioning to CO2. So yeah, we do not see people have a samba less than 4.5 minutes. It's unless the person was really stressing from like 2.5, 3 minutes onwards. So yeah, we'll talk about how long you think you've got versus how long you're actually holding your breath. If you look at breath holds as a graph of time, then this line being blackout, and this being our oxygen and carbon dioxide. Your oxygen, so people think, who aren't freedivers, that because they feel the urge to breathe from low levels of oxygen, that when they hyperventilate, because they can feel comfortable longer, they think that they're getting more oxygen. Well, you can't. Like, physics doesn't work like that. Unless you increase the percentage of oxygen that you're breathing, your oxygen's still only going to start at a ppO2 of 0.21, which is the equivalent of 21% oxygen and air, right? So we got 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen, and that makes up air at 1 bar. So this blackout line here, people think when you black out, your oxygen's at 0. It's not at 0, it's at 0.1. That's the level, 10%, that your brain says, I need more oxygen than I'm getting. I'm going to actively shut down shut down all of the conscious muscles, and that will give me that extra little bit of blood flow that I need to regain consciousness. People are not unconscious for longer than 3, 4, 5 seconds. It's extremely rare to see blackouts longer than that. In the 5 that I've had, the only one of them that was longer than that was on my level 2 course, because I was in fact, we talk about people that are pushy. I'm glad Ben Coy's not here tonight, because when we taught him how to breathe on a job down in Harvey Dam, replacing some intake structures, I told you guys this the other day, that he was now going from a normal guy who was doing like 14, 15, 16 meter dives and could get down and see the job site at like 20 meters. We were working from like 18 to 28 meters deep. And then he could get down and move around the job site a little bit. Then he could get down and grab a yabby. And by the end of the day, he was coming up with like 3, 4 yabbies. But a few times he'd like come out of the water really hard. And I said, oi, Ben. And my mate Jay Hayes was like, we fucking told you, bro. Like, you start breathing like this, you're going to be doing a lot more than you could do quickly. And he's like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, yeah, well, just take it easy. So he bursts out of the water at some point with 4 fucking yabbies, puts him down on the deck, and his eyes roll back in his head, and he passes out in the water. And everyone always says, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right, when they come to. And I'm like, I'm already in the water. I'm like, mate, if you were all right, I wouldn't be in the water in my fucking overalls and steel caps on, would I? So I was on my level 2, exactly like what happened with Andre there. You're already pretty comfortable with the CO2 thing, so you're a bit of a higher risk category. I definitely hyperventilated a little bit because it was my PB 34 meter dive, exactly the same. I got stung by a jellyfish in free fall at like 23, 24 meters, when you should be like at your most chilled out point. Enough to stop me on the line, and oh Jesus, fuck, that was a real snotty one. And like, okay, here we go, 34 meters, I got this. And like, you're always gonna have like some self-doubt creep in on a PB dive anyway. And in the Gulf of Thailand, it's like murky, that bottom 5 or 6 meters. And I was like, fucking hell, where is this bottom weight? Like, it just seemed to take forever to get there. And then when I hit it, I turned and came back at 1,000,000 miles an hour. My safety diver was at 15 meters. And I was powering up past him, having really bad contractions. And I had a contraction where bubbles come out, which is a really bad sign for people who are doing any kind of breath holding. And he raised his eyebrow at me. And like, I went to say, I'm okay. But that was the last thing I remember. I remember waving at him. And then, so I was out from 7 or 8 meters deep, and I was unconscious on the surface for about 20 seconds. That's a long time for someone to be unconscious, because you make these weird, horrible noises where your body's still trying to breathe, but it's like bubbling past your lips. And when there's another like 15 to 18 freedivers around and you come to and they're all looking at you like this, you're like, I'm all right. What are you looking at me for? I'm fine. And someone's like, give him his mask back. And I was like, yeah, fuck, hey, give me my mask back. What's going on? So yeah, you don't have any recollection of the time that you were out, but PB dive, stung by a jellyfish, hyperventilated probably a little bit, didn't make it back to the surface. And so, yeah, hyperventilation is definitely so easy to come by just by doing anything close to deep breaths. Only really your last 2 breaths should be anything considered deep. Everything else should be pretty casual, pretty relaxed. And so if you had to talk about your breathe up, actually, we don't really have time on the sheet to do that. Your breathe up exists purely to relax you. There is no intention to breathe more than normal. So whatever type of breathing you want to use that relaxes you, and we teach people triangular, like 3 to 4 seconds in, 6 to 8 seconds out, trying to just keep it in their belly, which is like half of their lung volume. 3 to 4 seconds in, slow the exhale down, 6 to 8 seconds out. Until you feel really relaxed, then you take your nice 2 big last breaths and go. So anything more than that, and everyone can look at it and go, actually, yeah, I think I breathe a little bit more than that. Unless you're getting to that point, guys, where you're doing 1 minute 45, 1 minute 50 dives and feeling okay, you probably are breathing too much. It's rare to see people like, I don't know anyone actually that's self-taught that is, except Phil Carson, all right? So Phil Carson was a fucking machine. Yeah, but we were just talking before with Matt, people still come unstuck. There are some guys that are naturally very, very good. Brad Melville, you guys know him from Cartel or something? I had heard the story, I read the story in the Spearfishing Journal, start of the 2010s somewhere, or whenever it was. And so I tell this story on our courses about if you're gonna buddy someone, you buddy someone 100% or don't even fucking bother. So they were on this trip to Fiji or Vanuatu, I can't remember, somewhere with like 35 meter viz in 26, 27 meters of water, which is way beyond what most people who are self-taught are comfortable in. But when the viz is really good and the water's warm and you can see balmy coral head and coral trout down there, you can kind of do a little bit more than normal. So they were on like the 3rd and 4th dive of the day, so not even really warmed up yet. You can see fish down there. His mate hits the surface and he's like, okay, wicked, I'm on. Away he goes. He's like, dive time, I think he said was about 150. And on the way back up, he sees his mate's gun sinking down at like 15 meters. And he has a look around and there's his mate sinking down at like 20 meters and he's already at 15 on the way up. Swims over, shoots him through the fin with his reel gun, gets to the surface and pulls him up by his fin. I don't know the guy's name, the buddy, but obviously 2 busted eardrums, water in his lungs, took him 4 or 5 months to recover. If Brad had missed that shot or his fin had got pulled off or he hadn't seen him, quite clearly that guy had been dead, but Brad would be dead as well. Because if you got to the surface knowing there's an emergency happening, there's no way you're going to wait the time off that you need and then be able to go and recover someone from the bottom. And so Ben Coy stands out like this because he's had a few blackouts. On another day, with Robbie Ashford and Cam Nielsen-Lynn as well. Watch out diving with those guys because, you know, they've got a bad rep. No, I'm kidding. Nothing to do with them. But Ben's one of those guys that as soon as the boat stops, he's got his mask and snorkel and fins on and he's in. And so he shot a Dewey on his first dive while the guys had just anchored the boat. It's like 15 kilo Dewey out here at Roto somewhere. And it holed up straight away. He had a float line, let the gun go, was on the surface for quite clearly not long enough. He was back down. The thing where it actually holed up was 21 meters, and he'd only done a level 2 freediving course. So he was doing 32, 33 meter dives maximum. So he's down there fighting this Dewey out of a hole and then going, what the fuck am I doing back down here at 21 meters? Goes for the surface. He's not completely wrapped on his line, but his shooting line, or his float line's wrapped over the top of his knife. So he gets to the surface. He doesn't actually get his head out of the water. He manages to splash his hand on the water and then pass out, while the boys who are getting their gear on a glassy morning go, oh, what was that splash over there? Oh, fuck me. So I had to go and haul Ben out of the water, passed out from not having his surface interval, diving at his maximum depth. So like there's always something that goes wrong, right? Blackouts don't just happen on normal dives when everyone's relaxed and feeling healthy and not hyperventilating. But yeah, you guys know that more than most people. But all right. Okay, 21%, right? The 0.21 partial pressure comes from that's what we're breathing now. When you black out, you're not at 0, you're at 0.1, which is equivalent of 10%. We don't see hypoxia in people less than 4.5 minutes. So you're really talking about 5 minutes for that oxygen level to get down to what's dangerous. And the world record's 13 minutes for guys and 9 minutes for women. So when you can relax into that discomfort and allow mammalian diving reflex to kick in, you've got a lot more up your sleeve than you think. And generally, contractions come on about half the time people can hold their breaths. When most people, that's it. So on a normal breath hold, your carbon dioxide's building up at your muscles. Oxygen is consumed by all cells, and those cells take oxygen in, spit carbon dioxide out. Your carbon dioxide level's rising. At some point, for most people, around 1 minute, especially on dives, they start to feel the urge to breathe. So that kind of intersection there, that's people's urge to breathe tolerance. Some people it's a little bit longer. You start feeling uncomfortable and you come back to the surface in before 2 minutes. Is anyone doing dives longer than 2 minutes? Okay, yep, don't talk to him. Okay, yeah, but so it's pretty unusual. So statistics-wise, most people are doing 2 minutes max. Even really for beginners, for breath holding, when we do breath holding in the classroom, people definitely on their first and second dives aren't doing more than 2 minutes, 2 minutes 20. Unless they've had experience, don't talk to Liam. All right, so when we hyperventilate, which is just doing what you kind of think isn't hyperventilating, taking those nice, comfortable, deep breaths, our CO2 level just starts lower. So it takes a little bit longer to actually hit that same level. So now we can dive, point being, before, this is your safety buffer. You've got 2.5 to 3 minutes of safety buffer from what you can physically do to what you can metabolically, anatomically, physiologically stay conscious to. People start hyperventilating and now they can dive another 30 or 40 seconds longer than that. People who hyperventilate hard and do breath holds can do them a lot longer than normal. And people go, wow, well, cool, now I've got an extra minute of breath hold time, Kev. This sounds like a really good idea. I'm like, yeah, but unfortunately, this isn't here anymore. Definitely not for dives. For static, it's a little bit different. But when you dive, mammalian diving reflex versus hyperventilation. We've got guys sometimes who have got their own heart rate monitors, and we'll do in class like a hyperventilation exercise where we hyperventilate hard for 45 seconds, then get people to hold their breaths, just to show them exactly that this kicks in a bit later. And I'll say, hey guys, what do you reckon your heart rate is when you hyperventilate? And some guys get up to 150, 160, but you say maybe 140. So when you hyperventilate, your heart rate's 140. With mammalian diving reflex, David Blaine gets down to 12, Pippin Ferreris gets down to 14. Your heart rate slows down, and even for argument's sake, let's say it's 60, which is at like the bottom end of normal. It's still less than half the amount. That arrow wasn't supposed to be an arrow, it's supposed to be a line. It's still less than half the amount if you hyperventilate. What else is happening when you hyperventilate? Everyone knows you feel a little bit dizzy and like giggly when you hyperventilate hard. What's causing that is the blood vessels in your brain constrict when your carbon dioxide level is really low. People who have done a lot of scuba diving in places where there's strong currents will, if I say, hey guys, you've been in one of those dives where you're having to kick a lot, you get a fucking thumping headache in the back of your head, dub, 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 dub. Yeah, if you lived in Bali and that as well, or as commercial divers, we wear that big diving helmet. If you're working hard, your CO2 builds up. That nasty thumping headache comes because the blood vessels in your brain dilate. So when your CO2 is high, you have cerebral vasodilation. When your CO2 is low, you have cerebral vasoconstriction. So literally less blood going to the place you need it going to the most, more blood going to the place you need it the most. Hyperventilation, you have, actually who else has done courses? Come on, what's the third defect with hyperventilating? We've got your blood, your heart rate super high, the blood vessels in your brain are constricted. There's a third killer with hyperventilating.
Hemoglobin, the bond between the hemoglobin is increased.
Bohr effect, absolutely. Yeah, well done. Someone promote that dude. Yeah. And so chemically, when your CO2 is low, the chemical bond between oxygen and hemoglobin floating around on red blood cells is tighter. So it's not as able to use the same amount of oxygen that's in your body. So less than normal ability to transport oxygen. Your spleen has 250 to 300 mils of red blood cells in it. When you are warming up, when your mammalian diving reflex kicks in, it will contract and eject these red blood cells into your circulating blood volume. More ability than normal to carry oxygen, less ability than normal to carry oxygen. The other cool thing that's happening, blood shift and peripheral vasoconstriction. Andre said in that video, the legs felt really deep burns, that deep burn, what was that from Anchorman? Inevitably, coming back from like 30-ish meter dives, your body is actively restricting blood flow to your limbs. So even if you're a really fit dude, Andre's fought a couple of MMA fights, doesn't matter. You get this nasty, horrific burning in your legs that's just lactic acid that you just can't get rid of. So actively preventing blood flow to your limbs, where does it go? Into your lungs. Not your lung airspace, but your lung pulmonary cardiovascular space. So bit beyond the scope of this thing, the deepest dive in the world is 230 meters. Guy Herbert Niche. When the guys, I put it on. I'm trying to, how much longer do I have? Oh, okay. I was going to say my speaker's fallen off. Jesus. Blood shift and peripheral vasoconstriction go hand in hand. Your body shifts blood around from places it doesn't need it as much to places that it does need it. So it creates what we call a semi-closed loop. If water's flowing downhill and there's a big river and a small stream, more water is going to go down the big river. The big river is now the blood flow to your lungs and brain, and so that's getting absolutely all of the leftover oxygen that's sitting there in that air. Hyperventilating is how people feel like they can hold their breath longer, but because their heart rate is firing hard, these other effects, you're now down here somewhere. So even if these lines don't cross, you've pretty much eliminated your safety barrier. It's very, very easy for people who have hyperventilated to black out if they dive to the limit of their comfort, because now their comfort is really in the danger zone. So if anyone wonders how shallow water blackout happens, or Andre there, he's a very fit dude, he's been diving a long time, and he's just unconscious for a few seconds, and that would have been him dead if he wasn't in a training environment. Any questions? Yep.
That graph over there, does that accommodate for change in pressure?
No, so the change in pressure makes it worse. Absolutely, yeah. So the change in pressure makes it worse. It exacerbates the problem because of the reducing PPO2 as you ascend. So yeah, it's definitely, metabolically, if you hyperventilate and do statics, there are lots of people that can get, in static breath holds. There is a school of thought that allows people to hyperventilate, but they still go through like a minute of allowing their heart rate to come down before they go for it. Those people though, know they need to know when they come up, because they can just keep going until they black out. So that's, hyperventilating will allow you to black out when previously before you couldn't. And the problem is that with that 36 liters a minute versus 4.5, people are doing it without realizing it. Even if you were taking half of what I demonstrated, you're still doing 3 times more than what you should be doing. It's a bit different if you're in pretty rough water and you've got to swim from spot to spot or you're dealing with current, but most people as well are overweighted. Absolutely, 100%. Most people are overweighted, so that when they're on the surface, they have to keep kicking just to remain. So you need to shut that shit off. The only way to hit this really relaxed performance end of freediving is to be able to relax 100% on the surface. And so we were out, I'm wearing 2 kilos in a 3.5 mil Cressy 2-piece. And I just had to put another weight on because we were in 4.5 meters looking for crays. So yeah, Alexey Molchanov has 8-liter lungs. He packs to 10 liters for his competition dives. He wears a wetsuit and no weight belt. Just get better at fucking duck diving. Like, there's no reason to just not improve your duck dive. And people say, oh, but I need the weight. You don't. Unless you're in shallower than 10 meters, you don't need the weight. You need to be able to breathe on the surface and not feel like you're sinking down at the bottom of each breath. And if that's happening, so, I mean, who's wearing, you know yourselves, right? If you're wearing 4.5, 5 kilos, you're probably a lazy bastard. I don't know. Okay, tall guys have big lungs, fair enough. And if you're wearing a decent new suit, yeah, okay, you probably need 4 kilos if you're diving 10 to 12 meters. But when you're looking at the performance end of the scale, you're better off working harder for that first 5 or 6 meters and then coming back easy for the 25 plus. That's it for hyperventilating. And they're the key things, that your body is helping you out if you slow your breathing down, and it's fucking you up if you dive nice and relaxed.
On that residual volume that you talked about,
yep.
That dead space we're talking about,
yep.
That normal breath that you take, you
yep.
actually minus the residual volume of that?
Yeah, so if you, yeah, exactly. You must have done a level 2? No. Okay, so yeah, when you start talking about residual volume, it does change the figures a little bit, but for ease of the explanation, it's better to leave it out. Yeah, because it's not actually 5 and 6, it's 3.8 and 5 really, 20 to 25%.
Because if you've got a residual volume and it's predominantly made up of CO2, we talk about difference in partial pressures, but you haven't scrubbed it as yet.
Yeah.
Then you're really starting with the residual volume that's got a higher CO2 partial pressure.
Yeah.
And if you take that to depth without
sure.
scrubbing it.
Yeah, and that's why your breathe up is minimum 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of this really relaxed breathing that serves only for you to just shut everything down, and then those nice big, I like to teach people 2 flushes until they get really good to ventilate. Yeah, so you've got 2.5 minutes of relaxation, then ventilation and go. And so as you get better, 1 full breath and then your dive breath is all you need. Yeah. Cool. All right. That's all the safety shit in a nutshell. We haven't got... blackout technique. Here's a good one. Anyone who's been taught different to my role model, come up, Liam, in front of the camera. So until human beings physically change the way that their arms and legs are based, the most ergonomic way to rescue somebody is simply under the chin, back of the head, your arms straight, so that if the guy's taller than you, your fins are clear of his, or if he's really tall, you just spin sideways a little bit. When you're getting rescued by people and their arms aren't straight, they are kicking you in the legs, and you're like, oi, you just squeeze them on the elbow and they'll straighten their arms out. So that's the most streamlined way to bring someone to the surface. And while I stress this is the best way, blackouts don't happen deep. So as long as you fucking get them to the surface and get their mask off, that's all that matters. But if you've got to do your fucking rescue course and bring people up from 25 meters, it's a shitload easier swimming someone up like this than bringing someone up like this. when you hit the surface, there are still some schools of thought that just hold the person on, like just lean back a little bit, Liam, like this. This is great, but there are a lot of people that you will not be able to hold up on the surface like this, because this is not where all of their body weight is. In a competition where people are wearing very light weights and neck weight, this works every time. When people are spearfishing, especially in Indo, where you might have like a 3mm top on and a weight belt and boardies, the bottom half of your body is really heavy and you will just slide away. So SSI started teaching this where the other arm comes underneath. Just come around so everyone can see. I like to try and get elbow in the middle, grab some fucking wetsuit, and then that way you've got the person there and they're not going anywhere. Then the other hand removes the mask, gives them tap, talk, blow, breathe, 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 and then if you need to, rescue breaths. The people who teach this, you go, okay, what are you going to do if you give rescue breaths? You cannot give rescue breaths if you do not switch hands, because you can't pinch the fucker's nose over the top of your own head. So, thanks Liam, you were great. You were fantastic, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you've been if you've covered a different way, essentially it doesn't matter as long as the person's on the surface with the mask off that opens up the airways. But if people are going to try and argue, which has happened with me, to say this way's better, I'm like, well, it's not. So essentially, as long as someone's comfortable with how they do things and they can support the person on the surface, an instructor trainer for AIDA came and said, when I said, you try and hold me like that in the pool, mate, it doesn't work. I will fucking, and he's like, Nick Kavaris, it is no problem. I just hold you up with my knee. I was like, what do you do? Fucking fin with the other foot. How's that supposed to work? So there are some people that just can't be told, but definitely supporting someone where the mass of their chest or lower back is here and you have their wetsuit there, they can't go anywhere, especially if it's a bit rough or bumpy like it is here often. That's it, eh? What else? Molchanovs. All right. Okay. So, right, Molchanovs have just come on the scene. If people are going to go pay for a freediving course, we've only just now switched over to a Molchanov center. It's the only system that you sign up to a community and you become what they nicknamed is a Molo. It's a bit of a cool term, but you get a app on your phone and you join this community where wherever you're based, it connects you with everyone else that's there, and you get a training program each week from guys like Adam Stern and Alexey Molchanov themselves, and you get badges and stuff for progressing. So the idea is that people don't just do, these different chapters. Freedive Tribe is Shazza, the dreadlock girl from Magnetic Island. But so wherever you are, there's a chapter that you can join. They give you training programs. That's me, so you profile of these personal bests you make up yourself, so you can put like 300 meters there if you like. When you signed up for your course, when you were certified, your contact details. And so you can go in and find other people in your area. And then the training programs are like here, what's happening. So there isn't another system that continues to train you past your actual course. And for the first year, certification fees are free to try and steal the market shares away from the established players like AIDA and SSI. So going forward, there isn't really a reason to not do this system. They're about not just creating some, definitely not just making money. So Paddy and Adam Stern and Paddy jumped on the bandwagon for freediving training really late, threw a lot of money at people who were established. And Adam Stern was initially, this is great, but then they realized that they're not interested in changing how they do things. They have the lowest requirements and the most ridiculous exam you've ever seen in your life, just to try and get people in the door. And they're $50 per certification. AIDA, 23 euro. Oh yeah, it's 20 euros, so maybe like, yeah. Pure apnea are $20, SSI are 35. So not only are they free for now, they're offering at least as good as the other systems are offering with this continued education plan. So that's really the lowdown with Molchanovs. They were initially just the Russian crew internally, and Adam Stern hit up Alexey at the last vertical blue because he was disenchanted with the shift over to PADI and said, hey, what do you think about starting up a system? And so we're now supporting our friends instead of some corporate mob that really don't give a fuck about you or the dive center. We don't get any support from these guys that we pay thousands and thousands of dollars a year to, whereas these guys will sort out anything you need straight away. So yeah, I can't impress on you guys enough that if you're gonna become a freediver, you know, everyone's already pretty much trained here, but this is definitely the best of the options out there. Molchanovs, safety, and then the last bit, spearfishing, but I gotta go for a piss, so. I'll come up with a cool video to fill in that time. We've seen, okay, so Mark Healy, I show a couple of videos on my courses that are core viewing, because you're always going to remember where you were the first time you've seen them. And when Mark Healy talked about freediving here, some of the terms that he uses are profoundly what freediving is to me. I used to get shivers down my spine like for a couple of years. So he uses some terms here that you could not describe. There's a term called synchronicity in psychology, where if you read something sometimes or you hear someone talking and it resonates with you or it clicks with you and you go, that's what I think. I couldn't have fucking told you how I think better than freediving than Mark Healy says it here. Plus he's a Jedi. But then talking about Bali and currents, so saying to Matt before, this guy who surfs 20 plus foot Hawaiian waves, he writes in his personal blog, the most scared he's ever been in his life is spearfishing at Nusa Penida, where the currents are shit out of nightmares. All right.
We're all gonna jump off.
Oh, fancy meeting you here. Yeah.
Fuck, I was struggling.
I don't know how long I've been talking. An hour. Must have been nearly an hour.
I haven't looked at my phone yet, but
Alright.
I will in a second.
Well, that's it really. Like just once that video's out.
Oh, you're doing good, mate. Everyone's fucking very captivated.
Oh,
You're doing
cool.
a good job. I wouldn't stress.
Cool. I just didn't want to, because they sort of said 30 to 40 minutes and
Don't worry, it's just Rory. It'll be fine.
be midnight and the place is closing. People are asleep. Cool.
Thank you. Alright.
Oh yeah, just wipe it on her pants. Thanks, man.
It's a lot of uncomfortable and soothing things mixing together, and it's a kind of calm euphoria. My life definitely revolves around the ocean and what it's good. It's just this constant state of unpredictability. It's good. It's a lively scene. 2 days ago, I would have said bull sharks would be the last on my list of sharks I'd want to be around when there's a lot of them and there's big individuals and they're being fed. What I learned from sharks is don't judge a book by its cover. Sharks can't change their facial expression. You don't know how they're reacting towards you aside from body language. And they tell you the things that they want you to know with their body. They always look mean to most people. So I've learned to take any kind of stereotypes about sharks that I've heard and put them aside.
So the big thing of this project is to change people's perceptions towards sharks, so that people get down there, get to swim around and amongst all these big animals, and then come away with a changed view to the importance of the shark in the ocean, and also the fact that it's very little threat to them as a diver.
Sharks are honest. You get to judge sharks solely on their actions. People have ulterior motives. I think people are way more dangerous than sharks. Humans are a part of the ocean. This is some of the most condensed forms of energy that our planet can produce, and you're being a part of that in a natural way. I love the beauty of the ocean, that it brings out what people really have. Can't lie to it, can't bluff it, can't bribe it, can't talk it out of anything. It is the equalizer. I definitely see myself as being part of the ocean as opposed to being a visitor. When I hit the water, I feel like I'm home. Everything else is don't know. It's not as simple.
Yeah. I use that video to talk about the progression of people from beginner freediving, which is what people are normally when they're at the school, to level 10. You know, like people are in the door for level 1. There's too much shit you have to learn on level 1, especially if people are not coming from a background of spearfishing, that they don't have time to shut their brain off. That their brain is always thinking, okay, how many triangular breathing? Fuck, he's looking at me. It's going to be my dive in a second. All right, I've got to take these last breaths. Duck dive. If my duck dive wasn't that good, I'm a bit too far away from the line. Fuck, I forgot to equalize. When your brain is doing all that shit, you don't get into that calm euphoria. You have to, that's what, when SSI came out, they had these 2 pillars of education. Knowledge overcomes fear and comfort by repetition. It needs to be that thing where you've done it enough times that you don't have to actively think about every step anymore. So you're like, I'm going to go for a dive. I feel relaxed. I take those last breaths, and it just happens. So when you're in level 1, people shouldn't feel bad if they don't get that really nice, chilled out, relaxed shit. It's not supposed to happen in level 1. Everything's too new, your brain's too active. So level 2 though, you've got a couple more days just to build on that foundation. And people then start doing these hang warm-up dives where you just go down the line of free immersion, you're sitting there watching the world go by, and at some point you go, this is fucking awesome. Like, here I am, chilling out, holding my breath. I'm holding my breath, and I'm watching shit going on, and that's when you really start to get into it. Level 3, though, people have learnt on level 2 how to do like thoracic warm-up stretches for their lungs. Level 3, we teach people packing and reverse packing, so to physically breathe in more and less than you can do with your normal respiratory muscles. People know exactly how they feel before they go diving. They know how they're going to feel on their first couple of dives. There's no more unknowns down there. They know exactly what's down there. People are leaving level 3, and freediving is just part of what they do now. So you really are part of that environment, and it's not any longer like this weird, strange place. I'm more comfortable. My mate, who's a sat diver, who I met just before in the pub, he was talking about that dive where I nearly blacked out. I don't remember dropping the gun. I don't remember the glove getting pulled off my hand. And he said, but yeah, if there was like a 1 in 50 chance, would you still do it? I was like, fuck yes. It's like underwater meditation. It's like an amazing environment where you can go and fly around in this silent, weightless place where you feel really comfortable and happy. So, you know, I hope for everybody then that this progression of freediving, as far as spearfishing is concerned, doesn't stop here. And that, you know, people get into these communities, even if it's in the club stuff with training nights, because the only way to really increase that level of comfort is to do it. It's like a joke about like if an ultramarathon runner stuck his head in the window and say, hey guys, who wants to go for a 20K run? It's going to be heaps of fun. Everyone would tell him to fuck right off. But he can do 100Ks. So for 20Ks for him is not even touching the sides. That's where you want to be at to progress comfortably and safely as a freediver. That's it, eh? Or just on the guns thing, Rife, however you pronounce their name, they haven't moved on to roller guns yet. We have Kimmy Werner comes out each year, it's her 3rd year in a row now, with all of the Rife crew, the guys from Jake from Drifter and Jeff Anderson, the Rip Curl CEO, and they all have their Rife 1.1234 euros. A guy, the Underwater Hunter, or Lucas Handley, Darren will know him, but you guys may be not familiar with him. He's a really good-looking dude. Anyone remember the Nutrigrain advert when you were a kid of the guy running up the beach with a chain around his neck?
Looks a bit like me.
Doesn't look at all like Liam. Is this guy, Lucas Handley, who was a model, but he also has a double degree in law and marine conservation, so that when he's working with marine teams and they have stuff to liaise with the government with, he's this ridiculously lovely guy, but who's a gun spearer, and he works out as a spearfishing guide in PNG or something. And he's like, Rife Euros should be fucking banned for the fads and offshore, because they have maimed and wounded way more fish than they've ever landed. And so these guys came out this year. They didn't actually spear, but the last year they did. There's like 6 guys shooting all day, landed nothing. I went out the next day and fucking nailed like a 15 kilo mahi, a couple of wahoo, a couple of small tuna, and sent them this picture, and they were like, what the fuck is going on? So like basically it's just that we have roller guns. Anyone who's got a single roller, already in Aussie, there is this trend that there is this preset tension that you guys are going to have like whether it's from the trigger grip or whatever, or trigger guard, like a preset tension underneath that sets the initial tension on the pull, right? That's what most people have got. But there's just no reason to stop there. So what Andre's introduced, which is probably a copy from Alemanni, is a rest tab underneath. So like someone hacked on me the other day for loading guns out of water, which is like that's how we teach people. We do dry loading. Only because we're here, make sure the safety's on. Otherwise, just make sure the shaft is locked in. Once it's on the rest tab, doesn't matter which one. Okay, once it's on the rest tab, now these bands underneath, there's no reason why you can't use the whole distance of the underneath of your gun. Except that that's under the shooting line. All right, imagine that's not under the shooting line. You should be able to pull that. It would be easier to have another rest tab just here, one of these MVD or style, whatever lugs. Pull that over the reel and it sits there. I don't know. Anyway, that looks really cool. Once these bands are both powered up all the way down the bottom, this top band has a maximum stretch core in it, which restricts it from being stretched past its optimal. So whatever you're setting at, 350% for that top band's all right. But by splitting the band and putting multiple bands on underneath, you've basically got like not quite a double roller, but like a 140% roller. You've got way more power than a single roller on its own, and less recoil than it would have been just by itself. So that's an easy mod. It's a little bit dicky to get set. In fact, I don't remember taking that shaft out. But so taking up that extra space, you're losing like a quarter of your maximum stretch if you don't have this system. And then splitting that band and putting a Dyneema core through that top band. This gun shits on most people's, like Ben Coy is like a Rife guy, doesn't believe in the roller revolution. He has a triple 18mm 1.4 homemade Rife Euro that nearly broke Pete Griffiths' thumb, and he ended up with bruising, and Pete Griffiths is a solid dude. So like if you've got a gun that you need to brace like a fucking shotgun to pull the trigger, or a gun that you could pull with zero tension in your wrist almost, I'm pretty happy to go with this for the same kind of performance. The next level up is these new guns from Andre that they're calling a Dragon Roller. We didn't have time to put the bands back on this one today, but this new system where if you've got normal guns and then maybe rollers, then invert and double rollers are about the same kind of performance, and then these things. So the bands actually start here, come down through these rollers at the back, then all the way along the bottom through these rollers at the front, and then all the way along the top again, and have this split band system where the top band has the maximum stretch core. This gun fires a 9.5mm shaft, an effective hard-hitting range 7 meters. Like I could easily put a hole in a 30-kilo GT, and the 45-kilo GT that I landed a while back, I was at this spot. Oh, you've been in the reef. You're at this spot looking out for these GTs. They're supposed to be coming from the deep, but he comes from in the shallows, like off of a 15-meter shelf, and I just turned the gun and pulled the trigger, like basically where Rory is. So you could never have done that with a normal big killing gun. And the shot literally, like these slip tips as well from Andre. If people haven't seen them, you don't normally need them here, but these are some of the best slip tips I've ever seen in my life. As cheap as it gets. Also, Andre's guns, that thing there is $900 with 2 shafts. So when you look at like what's the Rob Allen rollers are like $950 or something from Adreno. Yeah, they're good guns, but that thing's considered like a blue water weapon compared to most guns that are getting around here. That's just this introduction. So if anyone hasn't seen, this is a triple roller, so 2 sets of rollers up the front, 1 set at the back, but you don't really need the other set up the front if you split the bands underneath. So even if I disregarded this thing here and just had that, the gun is still incredibly powerful. When you add that shit on, I don't know how the gun doesn't break every time you pull the trigger, because it hucks that shaft. The other thing about rollers is then you're increasing the shaft speed 1.3 to 1.4 times faster than normal. So people say, oh yeah, my gun can do that. I'm like, yeah, but you've got to fucking aim up. Joe was really good, but there was a lad, one of my mates who's a Spiro from San Diego, like 52-year-old now, put him on the targets at 6 meters, and he was hitting the target with his 1.2 powered up to fuck pathos. And I was pretty impressed, but when I had a shot with his gun, 3 shots in a row, I was like 8 inches low. And I was like, fuck, is it me? I said, bro, where are you aiming? You pull the trigger. He's like, yeah, about 6 inches up. So I was like, oh, right, yeah, because with my gun, you're literally just fucking aiming on the crosshairs, and you get about 1 inch or 2 of drop at 6 meters. So, yeah, that's where, if you're going to, roller guns are going to go in that direction soon, because you're just getting more power out of the same shit. So it's a short gun with a really fast shaft and a really long range and fuck all recoil. So it's like, just keep going up the rollers list. Ah, that's it. Cheers. Beers are on Rory. Yeah. Yeah.
Questions?
Nah, that's it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, call it, yeah.
So how do you breathe up?
Yeah, so, okay, Mike Board was my instructor trainer from Freedive Gilly, and everyone who's really good, they go away from having any breathe up. They go away from any like formalized breathe up. They just breathe relaxed and comfortable, total volume, until they feel ready to go. So for like 3.5, 4 minutes. Everyone knows Brandon Whalers from Instagram, like Where's Whalers. He's like Rife's top guy, well, him and Cam O'Connell and that. He shot a fish at like 42 meters, when I say recently, in the last 5 or 6 months. And he said, yeah, I just had like a 6.5 minute breathe up and it was a cruise. So your breathe up exists purely to relax you. And so whatever works for relaxing you, and beginner students, they need a framework to work in. And that's why we give them the triangular breathing. But as people learn to know themselves, you don't need that anymore. It's just whatever is the most relaxing for you. And so by using this triangular breathing, 3 to 4 seconds in, 6 to 8 seconds out, belly only, people focus on that for a couple of minutes. They stop thinking about their fucking tax returns that are due next week and that their missus is a C-bomb. You know, like, so by bringing your attention inwards, that's how you relax your brain. So, and it's a tool we give people is just this triangular breathing technique.
So it's just a relaxation technique?
Absolutely, yeah.
Self-hypnosis?
Yeah, whatever it is that works for you, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yo.
On a 40-year-old man, without stretching, without like a normal pace, how far can he go? Like how deep he can?
40-year-old?
40-year-old guy. Yeah.
Well, you're limited. Okay, so.
I'm not even spearfishing before. Just starting out 35, 40 years old.
30 meters. Physiologically, there is no reason why anybody who's relaxed can't do 30 meters. That's the only thing holding anyone back from 30 meters is psychological. So physiologically, your lungs at 30 meters are at 4 atmospheres, so 20% of their lung volume. So that's the point where people can't physically equalize any deeper, but most people will turn around before then. I had a 14-year-old student from Cairns. His old man was a 63-year-old German guy, had his own sailing catamaran, did 43.5 meters on his level 2 course, on day 2 of his level 2 course. So there's nothing holding you back anatomically except your brain, which is going, fuck, this is a shit idea, get us out of here. So yeah, that's why this comfort by repetition, you never ever want to do a dive you're not 100% sure you can do, or 110% if you want to go look at those other guys. And the only way to do that is if you want to progress from 15 to 25 meters, you don't just get comfortable going to 15 and go, here we go, 25. You go to 15, you come back. You go to 15 for 5 seconds, you come back. You go to 15 for 10 seconds, you come back. You go to 15 until you're fucking sick of 15. And then you go to 17 and come back. And that way, over maybe 3 or 4 sessions, you're now comfortably doing 25 meters. If you try and jump ahead of that progression, you'll get to some point where you go, shit, that was about the limit, I was nearly out of gas, and your progression slows down or even steps back the way. So your progression always wants to be well within what you feel comfortable with, and the only way to do that is to just, hit 15 meters and sit on the bottom, and I'll be there like this. And then, cool, okay, and you might feel a little bit, oh, it's fucked, all right, okay, but the next time, so there's no reason why not, man. We get plenty of guys. We had a guy in Hopetown teaching courses that started last year who did 4 minutes, 14 breath holds, 17-year-old kid, and a 4 minute, 4 breath hold from a 13-year-old kid in Dunsborough. And without hyperventilating. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right, cheers, guys. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you can't clap twice. That's enough. Yeah. Oh, mate.
Cheers, mate. We've got you something that you're never ever going to use in Bali.
No, I'll use it here.
But you have to wear shirts in Australia every day.
I know, mate. For pubs, apparently for pubs you do. Cheers, man.
Mate.
Ta.
Kev's and Fusion Freediving have been a big supporter of the club for a number of years as well. So it's something little we can give back.
Cheers.